Get started. Thank you all for participating today. We are going to go ahead and get started. We've got a couple of people that I think are going to join us, or at least I expect they will be joining us since they are on the agenda. Since that's kind of the way this operates, is if they're on the agenda, they should be here, or at least online. So I think we'll go ahead and get started with some welcome introductions. We're going to start with the gentleman to my left.
Robert Sinclair, City Cannon Beach.
Thank you, Robert, for being our technical assistance, our technical expert, and everything techie. I appreciate that. My name is Jay Blake. I'm the planning manager for Clatsop County, and I serve as an MC/coordinator for this group. And I will try to make sure that we continue to move through our agenda as quickly as we can and have a good discussion. Sir.
Steve Sokolowski from Cannon Beach.
Rita Packville, Gearhart City Council. Barb Knapp, Cannon Beach Mayor.
Gary Hayes, Cannon Beach City Council.
Steve Wright, Seaside Mayor.
Paul Mitchell, Warrington Commission.
Denise Loffman, with the Columbia River Estuary Study Taskforce.
Brent Estes, Department of Land Conservation and Development.
Christina Little, Housing Outreach Specialist for the BOB program at Providence.
Robert Seaside, thank you for being here. We've got a person who just sat down next to me, who's about to. Please introduce yourself and tell us how important you are.
I'm really important. Really important.
All right.
Sorry.
All right, Tom Bronson, and also Alyssa in the corner.
Alyssa Gertler, Clatsop County Housing Manager.
In the back.
Andy Kipp, Astoria Housing Alliance.
All right, Andy Kemp, nice to meet you. All right, we're gonna move online. Start with Parker.
Hello, I'm Parker Salmons, the Tillamook County Housing Coordinator.
Welcome to our task force. Thank you for agreeing to participate. Garrett.
I am Garrett Phillips with Columbia River Estuary Study Task Force.
All right. Gail.
I'm Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director for Clatsop County.
All right, Jared.
Hi, I'm Jared Karnofsky from Columbia Memorial Hospital, Vice President of Ancillary and Support Services.
So both hospitals are represented today. Congratulations. We should feel safe. Nancy.
I'm Nancy McCarthy, City Councilor for Cannon Beach.
All right, thank you, Nancy. Olivia.
Hi, I'm Olivia Palmer. I'm a reporter with The Historian, just here to observe today.
Is anyone else online having audio problems? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear him for a second. Yeah.
It seems like the microphone switched to a different source.
Okay.
Typically, it's best if you talk right now.
All right. So we're gonna try this again. We better. All right, there we go.
Yes.
I just have to use my teacher voice and project a little bit more. So Ogilvy iPad 6.
Brandon Ogilvy, Cannon Beach City Council.
Oh, all right. Congratulations. I'm glad you're all here. They're all here to collect water. No, I'm just kidding. All right. 503-702-3026.
Hi, it's Peter Watts. I'm the Gearhart City Attorney.
All right, Peter, nice to have you here. Thank you very much for participating. Anybody else just join us? Yes, we have a couple of people who have joined us in the back. They need to introduce themselves and tell us why they're important.
Oh, that's very generous. I'm Jess Alacio. I'm presenting today with my husband Dan and our baby Cora, and we're excited to talk to everyone about the project.
All right. Good to see you. All right, great, awesome. So let's get to our agenda. We've done welcome and introductions. Have I missed anyone? I don't think I have. We should be good. The Housing Planning Assistance Project update. Alyssa, if you could give us an update as far as where we're at.
So have you guys all been on the edge of your seat since last month? Wondering what's been going on? I know this probably keeps you up at night.
It does.
The good news is, I think I reported last month that the contract is signed with the consultant and, we've had our first kickoff meeting. Brett's been part of it with me, helping represent DLCD. I actually thought they might join the meeting today, but, the next step that's gonna happen is we're starting on the buildable land inventory in particular. It's gonna go buildable land inventory, then infrastructure inventory, then building inventory at the end in that order. So, I'm gonna send out an email as soon as I get the data request from the consultants, basically saying to each of the cities, here's what we need from you to provide the data about your city that will start the buildable land inventory, and hopefully most of you should have it, and this will also go to the county, as you know, Jay. And so I just need to make sure that I know who all the right point people are to reach out to. You know, I know like at the county, we have help with GIS who we'll bring in, but I don't know if you all have GIS or if you do that yourself. Or if there's anyone else who wants to be involved who's not actually a city staff person, so any of you guys, you know, if you care about the data, I'm happy to share it with you. Or we can just report on it, but the next thing we're gonna do is have the consultants start digging into the data, and I don't know if there's anything you wanna add?
No, I think it's just, next is getting all the data, from the different jurisdictions. I know that, you know, different jurisdictions have, different, levels of data, so the consultant's just gonna be looking at what you have and being able to, you know, fill in the gaps as needed.
Yeah. So consultants will be coming, I think, to future meetings as the data starts getting collected and they start pulling together some findings and information that, like, you know, the data collection is not the good part, it's the analysis that comes from it. So we'll have them on future meeting agendas to start sharing results and findings so that we can, you know, the end goal is we'll all have a report. It'll be, you know, countywide, but also for each city. So we want to make sure that you all get to weigh in on the content of it and make sure that it's relevant and helpful to what we're doing here. So that's about it.
Okay, question?
Just what's, remind me what the timeline here is for, to get to the analysis part?
Yes, well, you know, it's like a multi-phase technical thing of analyzing data on land, on our infrastructure. So they're gonna look at, you know, land use data, then they're gonna look at capital improvement plans, and then they're gonna look at like building and demographic information. The final end date is no later than June 2025. We hope to be done by April 2025. You guys in Astoria have to do your housing capacity analysis starting in 2026, I believe. And so the goal is that this becomes the foundation where you already have the land and infrastructure work done. And so, yeah, again, Brett, I don't know if that's right.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, just wanna make sure I'm not speaking out of turn here.
Yeah, and when Alyssa says everything needs to be done, June of 2025, that's the closeout. So we typically say work is done really by the end of May. And so you have the final month to be able to get all the paperwork done and close out through the state.
And if you look at the consultant list of work tasks, the timeline is March, April to be done with all the work and just be finalizing the reports. And I will mention that as part of the end tasks, what they have built into their scope is presentations to city councils, planning commissions, any other bodies to basically roll out the report. So for you guys to think like, you know, as we get into that spring 2025 timeframe, when you would want to have a presentation and to whom, because we wanted to make sure that each city gets to actually have their own conversation about this and not just have it at this table. So that'll be the end of the project, is basically them coming around and talking to you, and sort of, you know, having a dialogue about where we go from here, so.
Gail has her hand up.
Yeah, so Alyssa, with the final reports, is that something that you would be looking for each jurisdiction to formally adopt or approve or accept or take some sort of formal action on at the end of all this?
So this is an interesting question. Thank you for asking. Really the only.
I can't hear you.
Hello, Mr. Owl. It's hard to like make eye contact in the room and talk to the owl, so you guys are there.
There we go. All right.
So my understanding, and again, Brett, you might want to weigh in here, because Astoria is the only city who actually has requirements from the state around the housing production capacity analysis. Probably the only city that would have to take some formal adoption to be Astoria. And I don't even know if that's necessary.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at that, because really this is
preliminary work that feeds in to the next step. I'll have to dig in that a little bit more just to verify, but really this was teeing up, the required work the city of Astoria is having to do for the house, and this buildable lands inventory is a first step, but, I'll have to, that's an interesting question. I'm gonna have to look and see how that would be differentiated going forward.
Yeah, I would just think that there just needs to be a definitive link to this data. Right, yeah, that, you say, yes, we acknowledge that you've done this. That we have.
Yeah, I'll dig into that a little bit more.
Good point, because 2019 study that we all heard, I don't think it was an adopted policy document or any kind of formal thing, but it did set the stage for, widely cited as the beginning of the body of research. This is really the next step. Try to have facts that we all, can work from, whatever policy choices we table here. So as an informational factual tool, state would require adoption. But I think it's a good question to all of you.
To add to that, I think the idea behind it was that there was going to be some flexibility. Each city may react differently to the data, but we all have consistent data and stuff. Some cities are going to be more aggressive, some will be more passive, and so it depends a lot on how each individual elected body will use the data. But it's going to be there. When they collect the data, how does it differentiate?
So that is.
Red flag, let me answer.
So, there is a whole statutory, set of, rules that come into play where you're taking out, things that are wetland, that are slopes above a certain steepness. So there's a whole set of criteria that's built into statute, where you're trying to take your gross acreage and then convert it to a set of net developable acreages based upon the rules. So, and the thing is, I give this example in my work with the city of Astoria a number of years ago. The city of Astoria did a buildable lands inventory in like 2009, and there are some areas that that I would say that the city council at the time said that lot is not developable, but under statute it was. It may be hard to develop, but it's still considered developable. And so that's kind of a set of reviews that consultant will be doing using this GIS data. So that's where the maps and the data come into play, is that they're going to be taking a look at all of the information that the cities have to be able to do this work, to be able to carve out what is buildable.
Yeah, that makes sense, because Warrenton's the fifth largest landmass in the state of Oregon. Good luck finding a place, only by empty land that is not buildable. One of the other things, Commissioner, that they look at is what is redevelopable, underdeveloped. And so that's another issue within Warrenton. There's things that we might look at and say, that's already got something on it, but it might be part of a larger tract that they say, well, there's more potential there. You look at things like setbacks. Potential.
Yeah, I mean, let's say you had a residentially zoned parcel that has minimum 5,000 square foot lots. And this house sits on an 1.5 acre lot, and it's sat on one side. Then you would look and say, look, there's ability to redevelop some infill housing on this large parcel to redevelop.
The example that I can cite specifically for Warrenton is the site that Johnson redid up in Hammond, where there was one house on an acre, and they took the house down, and there will be 7 potential building sites. So that's kind of a redevelopment opportunity. But that's also part of this whole discussion, what could be done.
I think the other thing that's important is that
each individual community, you know, help them know criteria and things that help. That, I think each of the individual communities really be looking at that data that's provided to provide the consultant.
Questions like the one that you asked, if you know certain things, the consultants will do the work, but we all know our community is the best, so it's gonna be real important for us to check their data once it's provided to us to ensure that indeed these things make sense.
Yep.
I have a question.
Please, yes.
How do you speak to, density rights? You know, because we have 36 acres, we have like 3 buildable lots. Somebody wanted to buy our density right, so we now only can have 2 building lots. Where is the census kept on density rights?
That's not a state of Oregon,
It's not?
no.
So would that be a county thing then?
I mean,
If it's in the rural areas, the county
It's
would track.
rural.
Yeah, if it's, then the county would track where density has been transferred.
So
Over time.
is there somewhere a record within the county where those density right census is kept?
That's something I'm gonna have to talk with Gail about.
Okay.
So,
Just curious.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah, and I'll just add finally to talk about a story because we're being required, so we need to we're looking to meet certain standards in the state for having buildable areas, and that was the issue that when we started this discussion, I pointed out I wanted something that was actually realistic, that was accurate, that actually told us what was really buildable versus what was put on there so that we could meet the standard, it seemed like, anyway, because like we've got a section of land between Emerald Heights and the end of Irving Street that is all vacant, and it's part of our buildable lands inventory, but it's federal land, and we can't touch it. So, you know, it's getting that, again, that really reality base, even if it puts us in a position with the state where they're showing us being short, we just need to confront that realistically, in my opinion.
Well, and just to take us back to the 2019 study, like this is based on some of the recommendations that came out of that basically said, these are land constrained communities for multiple reasons. And really each city, to your point, has a different set of constraints and issues to deal with. But we all have constraints and issues, literally every city here. And so the report basically said, you know, take a better look at what's actually buildable because you are probably overestimating things that are buildable. But at the same time, also take a look at making sure that you're using zoned land as efficiently as possible because you're not gonna get more land. You know, there's only so much land you're gonna get. And so many of these issues that you're bringing up are directly in response to the recommendations that came out of the report and are exactly the things we're trying to solve for. So you start with the first report, and then we're gonna have the second report, and then it's gonna point us toward, okay, now what do we do? So this is in direct response to everything you guys are bringing up.
and to echo Steve's comment, each city,
At the heart of this story.
each city will need to work with the consultant to make sure that the information that's presented is accurate and does reflect what's on the ground.
Right.
Okay. Other comments at all?
No, I'll just, I'll bring them back as soon as I can, the consultants to talk with you guys.
All right,
This is Peter Watts. Could I make a comment?
please.
So I recently have been dealing with the UGB expansion, and my experience has been that upzoning is far more common than an expansion, depending on, you know, a variety of factors. So oftentimes people think if there isn't a 20-year buildable land inventory, or if we're getting short, then it would be an expansion, but that's not necessarily the case. Under state statutes, you can either upzone, expand, or both, and normally it's both. And in Gearhart, we have very limited abilities to expand, just probably because of similar factors that everyone else is dealing with. And so that's something that's important for the, in my opinion, for the public to understand, is that there are a variety of tools that can help meet that 20-year need.
Thank you for mentioning, Peter, upzoning. Could you give us a definition for people who aren't zoning nerds like myself?
Yeah, so absolutely. You know, one of the things that cities will look at is the maximum density that will be allowed in a zone. And so for years I did some legal work in the city of Milwaukee, and they part of the way that they were able to meet their need, and they're part of Metro, but the Metro cities kind of look at themselves as well. Was to allow higher density apartments, so 5-story, and there are several now that have been built in the downtown. And previously under their code, I think they were limited to a 3-story. Alyssa probably familiar with as well, but they were limited, and it kind of limited the number of units as well. But by allowing higher density development, and they had light rail go through the city, so that really aided with that as well. That helped them meet that need. So you could, in Gearhart, we have an area that's that may be zoned R1. There's a very small land swap we're contemplating. Anyway, and upzoning would allow us to, for part of that, to maybe develop it in R2 or a higher density. The thing about land swaps now is it's kind of a zone to zone thing, but theoretically, if we had land zoned and then we came back as not meeting our need, we could then look at some of the undeveloped parcels to zoning and to see if by changing the zone to add more density, we would be allowed to meet the need that way. And virtually every expansion, and then I was involved in Scapoose's expansion in King City. One of the things, one which is in Metro and the other not, but one of the things that we looked at was the current zoning and whether there were opportunities to more efficiently develop it at a higher level of density. So that's something that I would expect to see as part of this process as well. If those numbers come back as having a need, the general rule is that if you have a 20-year buildable lands inventory, then you're not necessarily looking at rezoning or an expansion.
Appreciate the information. So, all right. Any other?
Can I circle back there? The first question we had on whether local governments were expected to adopt the products of the Housing Planning Assistance Grant Project, some of the initial responses were coming in a little garbled online. And I just wanted to confirm that the basic message was that that's up to each local government on whether they want to adopt them and how they're going to use them. Is that what we heard?
Generally, but this is Brett Garrett. What we're going to be doing is circling back. The big question was specifically Astoria, because of its need for the housing capacity analysis work. But we're going to circle back, and I want to talk with the housing folks at DLCD a little bit more to be able to just get into come back.
Stay tuned. In other words, join us at our next meeting, Garrett. Maybe we'll know. All right. Okay. It is actually time. We'll move on to our next item, and it's really actually a pleasure of mine to introduce the speakers who are going to enlighten us on another project that is moving in the right direction and trying to provide a multitude of housing options within our greater community. The Salacios are relatively new to the Warrenton community. Jess serves on the planning commission. That's where I met the family initially. And Jess and her husband have put together a proposal that is going to redevelop, hopefully provide new center to that community. And so, Jess, if you want to, we've got your presentation ready to go. I'm actually, you stay here.
Oh, no, we'll be in front.
No. Oh, do you want to be in front?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Even better. Even better. What role does Cora play in this?
She's the project.
All right. Okay. All right.
Yeah, so just a lot of I've been trying to for a while. but I feel like I owe someone. So I'm Jeff Lasso. I'm fairly new to the community. And we're really. My background is policy management.
Excuse me, I don't think we can hear online here.
Oh, okay. Is that
We need
better?
a microphone or something.
We're moving closer to the owl.
Any better?
For the presentation, I can move this back a little.
That's much.
Two hands on the heart, yeah.
No, I don't have any.
What happens is whenever you, turn to speak to someone, if it
Okay.
doesn't pick up as well.
How's that?
That's much better. Thank you.
All right, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, and I'm Dan. I think you were saying my background is more in legal finance. So I'm in law school in the University of Florida, but I work at a financial services company in compliance.
Yeah, so all that to say, we're not developers by trade. We fell into this just by being part of the community and seeing an opportunity. So with that, next slide, please. So we told you a little bit about us, but we're gonna be talking more about why Fenton, why this building, what the strategy was that we used and what we're thinking of moving forward, the funding parts of all this, and then additional opportunities. So a little bit about what was touched on earlier with regards to the wider vision of what's possible in the community. Okay, we can move on from that. So why Fenton? This is an image, if you guys haven't seen it, it's from the City Health dashboard. This is a data dashboard with data specifically to the city of Warrenton. This was from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. It was a grant I applied for last year and we were awarded it. I highly recommend other cities apply for it. It's a very straightforward application process. And you have access to, I think, upwards of 36 different metrics related to economics and health. That being said, one thing that stood out is we are heavily rent burdened in our community. It's no surprise to anyone here. This was a metric that I didn't see in some of the data studies on the county website, but I wanted to call it out because when people aren't able to put a roof over their head, other things suffer. And we need to address this because we know that stable and affordable housing is part of the infrastructure that allows the community to really thrive. Another aspect to this, not only housing, but it's a mixed use space. And so we in Warrenton, for those that are familiar, we lack a third space. We have a great library, but we don't really have a place to gather. And Commissioner Mitchell knows well, like we had a meeting at my house, and there shouldn't be a reason, well, I love hosting. You know, you should be able to go somewhere and have a coffee and to sit down. We also lack a lot of opportunities for economic activity. If you're familiar with downtown, again, we have the library, we have a fantastic market. We have a great dive bar, what else?
Diner.
And a diner. But where do small entrepreneurs set up shop, you know? We don't have that space right now. So we saw Fenton and we saw it as just a hidden gem and an opportunity.
And since we moved here in 2021, it's only been vacant. So in talking to others, we've learned kind of the history and the kind of missed opportunities and past businesses that were in that space. But I think it's always just been a blank opportunity to us since we've been here.
And this is an image that was pulled from the 2019 Clatsop housing document. So what we're trying to accomplish with this project is this missing middle aspect right now. So this live work opportunity. I think that's kind of our sweet spot. It's small scale enough where we're able to make impact and move pretty rapidly to get it done. And then for those not familiar with the downtown corridor, this is actually where it is. So you come, I should know these streets, Harbor, come down Harbor, take a left at the Shell station, and it's the 2-story blue building right there. So that's what it looks like in its current state. There's no longer the dumpster out front, but it's still empty on the bottom floor. And there's 6 residential units, on the top floor. When we first toured it, this is what it looked like.
I mean, although it actually has been very helpful because it's essentially demoed. So we've been able to tour it with subcontractors and inspections go a lot smoother when you can look up and see the piping and the electrical.
Yeah.
So. Surprises.
We were able to most recently get into the last few remaining residential units, and there's significant challenges, I would say. There was at one time a rodent infestation, there's water intrusion, there's plumbing that's not hooked up correctly, so we have individuals living in situations that are not safe. And as someone with a background in public health, I feel urgently the need to resolve this, especially when people are paying, you know, close to market rents. They deserve to live in a home that's safe and secure and free of vermin.
And in that unit in particular, which is the last one we saw, I don't know if the picture shows it, you can kind of see where the molding is coming apart. The pictures don't do it full justice, but there was a support wall that was removed on the first floor, and it really hit this unit the worst. I mean, if you set a ball down, it rolls straight across the whole place.
So what we would love to create with this space, first and foremost, an updated, clean and safe environment. This is actually a project for our home. We added an accessory dwelling unit to our house in the last year, which was a great learning opportunity and gave us experience going through the permitting process and everything else. But something similar, just really basic. All you need is making sure your window's closed, water's not getting in, and there's not vermin around. So recreating this opportunity with all the residential units. And then with regards to the commercial space, there's similar models that exist throughout the country that have been really successful. We're not creating any new idea here. We're just replicating what we know works, places that we've been that feel really vibrant and really cool. So some of our favorite places, there's one in Kauai, Hawaii, and then there's a place called Space in the San Diego area that allow small entrepreneurs to come in, set up shop in commercial space. Neither of these have residential, but it's more the commercial that we're working to replicate. And again, what we would love to have in the space, or what we're going to have in the space, is a light and bright coffee shop where people can sit and hang out. If you work remotely, you can come there. If you are part of a nonprofit, I'm part of the Master Gardeners Association, and we have a really hard time finding space to meet. And so we want to create places where people can gather, and also for families. We have a little one over there. We also have a 3-year-old, and it's hard to find places to go where you feel comfortable with children because they're getting into everything. And we have a lot of homeschool families that, where do they meet and what do they do when they want to get together? So providing a space that meets the needs of the community. We know how important social infrastructure is, and we know how important community connection is, and now we just need to build it and make it happen.
In this, for the coffee shop, similar to the James Coffee Company example from San Diego, we view this as like the anchor. So one of the anchor tenants in the retail space, and then the remaining slides, I believe, go through just potential ideas for other businesses that might rent out small spaces or larger retail spaces throughout the rest of the first floor.
Yeah, so some of the things that I mentioned Master Gardener, so I like plants and workshops, providing a place for people to gather, for anyone that's into open mic nights or music, making sure it's flexible enough to meet the needs of the community is really important, and stimulating that economic activity through commerce.
I know as you took out these slides.
So this was our original timeline, as you can see. I wanted to keep it in there because I think it's really important to have honest and transparent conversations. We were very ambitious when we originally presented to the city. Paul knows this really well because he's seen this deck before, but we were hoping to be open this summer. And unfortunately, you know, we ran into some challenges with the acquisition of the building, and we extended due diligence. And so now we're looking at hopefully April 2025. I'm still hoping for this fall, but you know, let the record show that that's more realistic. And yeah, I just thought it's critical to make sure that when we're having these discussions as a community, when we're inviting other people to the space that might not have as much experience, that we tell it how it is. And unfortunately, we just had to add more time to the process at this point. Anything to add?
Just to point out, like, as Jess mentioned, we thought acquisition would be in late summer last year. Obviously, we're near the end of our due diligence here. I'm hoping to close very shortly. But even up to this point, it's been a huge learning curve, and I'm sure this black bar is gonna be even more so a learning curve for us, but we're getting excited about finally getting started in this space.
I will say though, on your behalf, part of this had to do with the seller. It wasn't all you, it was, it took a while.
It initially was off market and the seller wanted to take it to market for a time, and so we just had to be a bit patient for a while.
Which is difficult.
Yeah.
So we've been very fortunate to have received a grant from the city of Warrenton through the Urban Renewal Funds, which I would say was the catalyst that actually allowed this project to happen. Being working class, you know, we weren't gonna be able to fund this ourselves. So having that initial trust from the community and having that as a foundation has allowed us to go out and seek other opportunities for funding, and that's gonna include an SBA loan. We'll also be throwing in quite a bit of money ourselves. Private investors, there's a really cool platform called Small Change, where you can fundraise from the community. The initial dream for this was to actually have a community-owned real estate trust. Because of the legal and financials and everything else, at this part in time, we cannot actually make that happen. But Small Change is another way to actually engage the community, pay back dividends, if we're able to go that route. And then we're seeking additional grants and ideas, because, you know, it always comes down to capital. But that is the way that we're looking at this capital stack right now. So that's the project in a nutshell. And then the other things that have just been top of mind for us. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the Clatsop GIS image, but this is the neighborhood right now. And I saw your Strong Towns hat. One thing we've been thinking about is this concept around incremental development. How do we allow small scale developers like ourselves, people that, you know, don't have that professional experience, go into their community and have an idea and actually make it happen? Or how do we allow people to build ADUs or mother-in-law units? So how can we stimulate that type of development, especially in Warrenton, where, you know, people have a little bit of extra space, but they might not have the extra time in the day or capacity or financial resources to make it happen. And then thinking about the vacant land, and is there a way to tax the vacant land? There's quite a bit of lots in our community that nothing is going on, and they won't answer their phone when I call them to ask, you know, if they'll sell it to me. But can we put some penalties there? And what does that look like? Would also like to think about, instead of just the stick, but the carrot. So what are the incentives that we can put on people that are doing this work? As a member of the Planning Commission, I would love to learn more about how we can be more proactive in city government and to engage new policies and new ordinances to actually make this happen. And then, you know, in the 2019 document, there was a discussion about community land trust, and could we do a community REIT, and what would that look like? And would it be at the Clatsop County level, or would we do city level? So these are all ideas that get us really, really excited, and that we're just grateful to have this forum to discuss it. And yeah, thank you for having us. Yeah.
I don't know how she was so good.
Yeah.
She doesn't let me hold her like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's always has to be like over the shoulder, so you'll teach me that.
Okay.
Yeah, so any thoughts or questions or critiques?
Let me add a couple of comments from the planning perspective. The history of that building is long. There have been a lot of opportunities that have happened and have been missed with it. Current ownership and some plans that they had made the building very difficult to redevelop. So there's some building code issues that have come into play which add to the overall costs. It is potentially the centerpiece of what could be a much nicer Main Avenue. And so I'm excited to see it move forward. Conceptually, the zoning in that allows almost everything you want to do. And so the zoning code isn't as much of the issue as it is perhaps someone needed the idea. And there's enough flexibility built into that code to allow the types of things that you're hoping to do there. And I'm hopeful that with the right combination of dominoes falling just right, that'll be the center to the redevelopment of that area. So,
Yeah.
so I think from the planning side of it, this is exactly what we would hope to have happen. And from the urban renewal program, it's exactly what they really were hoping. And it just took someone with an idea and a little bit of energy and some tenacity to do this. And that's the one thing that sometimes is missing is tenacity. Stick to itiveness, where you get an idea, you start, oh, there's too many things I gotta stop. And that's not you guys.
Or it's not Jess.
Well, okay.
At ADU, she showed,
Yeah.
I've retired from hanging drywall after that, but I wasn't done, but I was in the middle of that when Jess, she just kept looking at this building. It's, we can see it from our house. It's, you know, it's right there.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's too much. We can't take that on. And, but she didn't stop, and conversations led to another, and then we toured it, and we learned about urban renewal, the whole program, and there was so much alignment there already and so much work that was done.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The other blessing is that the urban renewal program has a sunset, and they were like, we gotta do something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And so so timing was actually okay.
Yeah.
And it was one of the key buildings that's
Yeah.
targeted by the urban renewal itself, was that
Yeah,
building.
oh, yeah.
You know, and I really was happy to hear last night that we've signed the documents and you guys are very close to your closing date.
Yay, yeah, that's good news.
Yeah, and we found a great architect, and we have engaged a structural engineering team. And so all the other dominoes are lining up to allow us to move very quickly on this. This wasn't a project that I anticipate taking on. You know, I heard that the CEO of Albertsons has like a second or third home in Gerhard, and that the Franz family, I'm like, where are these people? Like, can you get them to come in here and develop this? And it didn't seem like there was really an appetite for those folks that, you know, might have economic capacity to come in and do it. So I was like, well, I guess we're just gonna have to do it. I think it was last year, after almost losing our library, that I felt like if we're gonna raise a family here, we need to create the community that we wanna live in. And, you know, let's do everything that we can to create the vision. And seeing the documents from that the city of Warrenton put together from the comprehensive plan, you know, almost 10 years ago, it's like, this is something that the community wants. But with everything that's happened with the economy and everything else, it's been challenging, so.
Yeah, that middle housing you talk about is really neat, especially in Warrenton. And I think that the fact that some of the people who've been living there, and the conditions they've been living there, you know, it's an abomination in my opinion, but to be able to have people come in and make it a place that people kind of don't go like this when they drive down Main Street, and turn it into something that people are proud of. I'm excited to see it happen.
Yeah.
I would love to have something like that in Seaside when you're done.
You got a convention center.
Well, our issue, we have housing above commercial. You just walk that way a couple blocks and it's there. But our issue is parking, you know, because we're really limited on parking. What do you do? And right now, you know, we'd have to pass something else to get parking, basically say, you don't have to have it. Nobody will go for that.
Yeah.
The new state statute that
Well, those things are coming out, yeah.
that addresses parking and
We'll see how that,
it's taking it out of the.
yeah, we'll see how that works.
Yeah, and I'm a huge proponent of active transit. I would love to see protected bike lanes and a greater focus, especially in our community when, you know, days like this and during the summer, it's so nice to be outside. If we could have a little bit more infrastructure there and no parking minimums. Yeah.
How much do the units rent for up above?
They're a bit all over the place. The quality of that one we showed was on the lower end, and it's actually a large studio or one bedroom, depending on how you classify it, but I think that's $850. There's a very nice 2-bedroom on the other end that was remodeled, and that's $1,500, and everything else is kind of in between there,
Yeah,
so.
there's a studio for 500, but
Market rents would probably be around 1,000 or so for the studios, given the space, and probably 1,500 or more for the 2 bedrooms. I know that goes for more, but
Yeah, oh, and that's another piece to all this, maintaining affordability. So aiming right at that 80% AMI for the community, since we know that's a little bit more realistic, and attainable for people. So. Yeah.
You can come to Cannon Beach when you're done.
It looks like Parker has a cat.
Has a question.
my job is just gonna be holding court on.
I took that from you, sorry.
Hey, guys, your project looks really cool. I just want to let you know that you might, I think it would qualify for the multifamily housing loan guarantee program through USDA. It might just be one that you want to take a look at if you are looking for financing options.
That's okay, thank you. Would you, the multifamily housing by USDA? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. And I can send that over to you if somebody puts an email address out there.
Okay, thank you.
We'll get that to you, Parker. Thank you.
Okay.
No problem.
All right, we got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see, what's next on our agenda? Oh, state legislative update on housing. Wonder who that might be.
Well, you guys, I feel like you might already know some of this, and so, right, the legislature's been adjourned now for 3 weeks. Right? And so it was a milestone session for housing legislation, and, how many of you guys have already gotten a briefing on this before I go through this? I know I already read I brought the talking points I gave to the county commissioner already, so, and obviously we have someone here from the state who can tell me in more detail about any of it, but, the big bill was Senate Bill 1537. It was a wide range of things. It literally had like 43 different sections in it. The main thing it did is create the Housing Accountability and Production Office, which maybe you guys have heard about, which is gonna be living in DLCD, basically. But coordinating between multiple agencies to basically move the governor's housing goals forward, right? You can jump in.
Go for it.
Or I'll let you jump in.
I'll fill in whenever.
Yeah. See how well I do, right? I took this, I think, part of a DLCD email anyway, so, and then there's this whole like, Counselor Bronson was mentioning, there is an opportunity to do land use adjustments for housing of all different kinds, setbacks, parking. There's change in what kind of land use decisions things can be. There's opting into amended housing regulations. And then there was also creation of the Housing Infrastructure Support Fund, so money for housing infrastructure. In a separate bill, there was a line item, bunch of specific infrastructure investments to communities. We didn't get any in Clatsop County, but I think Lincoln County got one. There is the Housing Project Revolving Loan Fund that got created, which is a new thing that is basically a tax exemption program that allows people to make loans to build affordable housing. To the point about capital access, this is actually targeted at middle income housing because there's so many state funding sources that target very low income housing. And obviously market rate kind of takes care of itself, but this missing middle didn't really have the public subsidy that it needed. So this is a creative new program that's gonna put, I think, starting $75 million for the Housing Revolving Loan Fund. Let's see what else.
Is it for housing of any sort in that category, or is it apartments, is it new homes?
It says requires these costs to be for 120% or less of area median income. And the eligible costs are infrastructure, system development charges, pre-development costs, construction costs, and land write-downs.
So it could apply to anything that kind of suited that.
Yeah, it doesn't have a form base.
Yeah, but 120 AMI is what
Yeah.
it sounds like it, so, it's that trying to get at that more towards workforce. There's always the question of, is 80% truly workforce in Clatsop County? And you heard that a lot, and I think that's really, trying to get a little bit higher eligibility for wages, so.
Right, and to subsidize, to your point, not just high-rise apartment buildings that you get tax credits for, but those sort of 2 to 6 units, smaller projects that don't really pencil out themselves, but serve that lower income. And so to your point, like, what does the form have to look like? Does it have to be a duplex, triplex, cottage, cluster apartment? All of those are in the eligibility.
What if there was a development for, let's say, 30 lots, that are two, and a portion of it is going to be aimed for that, the other portion is going to be marketed. They would, is it willing to work into niches, like, do you have any sense
Well,
of
it's
that?
interesting, because they basically just created the legislation. Now
Yeah.
OHCS has to stand
Right,
alone
okay,
program.
so we're making rules.
Right, and so basically, right, is probably the part of it that meets the required income level would be eligible for the revolving loan fund, would be my guess.
Yeah.
And actually OHCS got all kinds of funding in this Senate Bill 1530, which is additional, another bill that passed. So they got more money for homeless shelters, there's more money for eviction prevention, land acquisition for affordable housing, manufactured dwelling unit, preservation. And so this is on top of that. So OHCS got a ton of money in addition to DLCD getting a ton of money and, hopefully capacity to implement this stuff as well, because it's like a whole new addition to the agency's portfolio. And then the other thing I wanted to mention that didn't get as much hype in the press is a bill called Senate Bill 1564, which basically, again, this is an LCDC thing, to do model ordinances for housing for small cities. So cities that are not the Astoria and above, but are the smaller Cannon Beaches and Mortons. And so that'll be interesting as you guys implement that program as well. Like, can the needs of these communities be kept in mind as those model codes get built? And then the last thing was, yeah, the project-specific infrastructure funding, so, yeah, we didn't get anything, Newport got something. You can trace who got what by whose legislature is. And that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about, unless you guys have specific questions about anything and what it means for us.
Let me say that, typically, a legislative summary is issued by DLCD on, what happens in a session. I know that there's, our legislative folks, are working on some of that. So there'll be more information that's going to be coming out. I mean, we're still going through and some of the legislation, 1537 specifically, really trying to understand and digest, kind of what ended up at the final end. There's, one thing was the one-time urban growth boundary swap, that is, in there that has certain specific, provisions for, I should say, a one-time urban growth boundary expansion, not a swap. There are specific limitations and provisions that would apply. And so that is also in 1537 that, I expect that there'll be some FAQs. There won't be rulemaking on that because it's legislation. And so it's what is in the statutes in the statute in terms of what would apply. I will say, the housing, HAPO, Housing Production Office, that's something that, that Astoria will be working with kind of specifically, because after there's the housing capacity analysis, there'll then be the housing production strategy, and really looking at how is the city of Astoria intending to meet their housing needs. And so HAPO will be involved in really kind of looking at how are things going along the way, how is Astoria functioning and trying to address their housing production strategy. The other thing which is kind of a new aspect to DLCD is that there's going to be a part of the HAPO office is that there is there'll be contacts if there is a housing developer who is feeling they're having a challenge with a certain jurisdiction. The developer has the ability to contact the HAPO office. And then the HAPO office will be working with the jurisdiction to try and understand what the challenges are in terms of getting needed housing built. So that's a new kind of realm for the Department of Land Conservation and Development being in, and more to come on that. That was all having to be stood up, but that is part and parcel of what will be included in that office.
And the good news is it also comes with grant money that you'll be able to give to
Right.
local jurisdictions who might be having issues in terms of being able to implement their.
Right, because the thing is, let's say that there's a concern that comes out through the HAPO office. It's, the intention is not to be coming over with the, beating the city over the head, but saying, okay, there's a provision in your code which is in conformance with state statutes that, needs to be addressed. Here are some tools that we can provide to be able to help that local jurisdiction come in compliance with state statute for development of housing. And really trying to work to be able to problem solve, to be able to get that housing constructed.
Okay,
That's it.
all right, great. Stay tuned for next year. More to come on that, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the last item on our agenda today, and that is the PSU population forecast information. And this is one that I think I'm presenting, so this should be interesting. All right, we'll see how it goes.
At least entertaining.
It'll be entertaining, I'm pretty sure. All right. So every few years, the Portland State University Center on Population Studies has a requirement that it has to provide future population forecasting for each of the regions around the state. I think it's every 5 years. Let's flip on to the next slide. Yeah, keep going. It's part of state statutes. They are required to provide up to a 50-year forecast for cities and counties. That is no easy task. Counties themselves are extremely difficult to project because trends change in 5, 10, 15 years. A pandemic changes how municipalities and counties will grow, but it is a requirement that they have to do. Much of the slides that you're going to see are directly from the PSU population projection meeting that was held 2 weeks ago, approximately. And so they go around the state and every 5 years update the regional population forecast, the county population forecast, and the city population forecast. The methodology is several pay grades above mine. And suffice it to say that there are people who are very knowledgeable in this field working through this process. Don't always agree with them, but you know what? They're knowledgeable and they're following a solid methodology. Go ahead, the next one. Here we go. We are part of Region 3, which goes from Clatsop County over to the Gorge. And so they rotate around. Our region includes Clatsop, Clackamas, Columbia, Hood River, Tillamook, Wasco, Washington, Yamhill, and Multnomah. Very diverse population trends within this particular region. We don't have the same issues that Hood River has, and we certainly don't have the same population issues that Multnomah and Clackamas have, and Washington. So it is kind of an interesting way that they do this. Go ahead and hit the next one. We are in the process right now. They just released some proposed forecasts a couple of weeks ago. They held a second meeting with a number of municipalities in the county, and they presented some of this additional information. During April and May, cities and counties have an opportunity to really dive into these projections and decide whether or not you agree with them. And there is a process set up where you can file an appeal to your population projection. I'm not promoting that right now, but it is something that is on the table for municipalities and counties if they truly want to challenge the projections that are coming forward. By that process is in June, and in July, August, they update all the data based on the information that they have and publish the report. So that's where we're at. We're in the March, April, May timeframe right now. Go ahead. They look at birth and deaths. They look at school enrollments, employment, driver's licenses, state income tax exemptions, all sorts of different tools to try to determine how many people are in a particular area. And it is a daunting task in listening to them present this information. There's a lot to it. Again, way beyond my understanding, but they are using data. This is data driven. This isn't just a dart board being thrown at the wall. Next one, please. Nope, keep going. All right, methodologies. Keep going. I'm not going to spend the time on methodologies because I'm not an expert. General trends. Here's what they're looking at. They're looking at fertility rates. declining for most population sectors. Mortality rates, we're living longer. Our population is aging as a whole. Migration. Migration is one of the more difficult ones in my mind to predict. The pandemic opened up opportunities for people to work remotely that may not have had that opportunity before. There are people, significant numbers of people who have moved to our region from the Portland metropolitan area because they can. We have facilities, we have internet, we have the ability for a lot of jobs to exist in homes that we wouldn't have thought of 20 to 25 years ago. Okay, population growth. The growth rate is slowing. That's a tough way to phrase that. But the actual increase, we are still increasing at this point in time, but the rate at which we are increasing our population is slowing over time. We're aging. Just look at me. I'm aging. Racial and ethnic diversity. That's the other thing that is kind of an interesting, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but the diversity is spreading throughout the state. And the population of the Hispanic population in Clatsop County is right around 10% now. And so that is likely to continue to change. Next slide, please.
I want to touch on the diversity thing. There's one thing that you'll be seeing as a part of Department of Land Conservation and Development projects, particularly grants and different efforts in the future, is there are going to be provisions for having greater public involvement around the diversity issue, so that you're reaching out to a broader set of folks in your community. So it's one of those things that's recognizing that racial ethnic diversity is increasing across the state, and you're going to be kind of seeing that really kind of coming through some of our programs, trying to encourage that and try to be able to get more perspectives through your planning processes because of that increase.
Not everybody can show up at a Zoom meeting on a Thursday evening. And so the idea is to try to reach more people with diverse opinions and hopefully have better discussion and better outcomes. All right. This is one that I think is kind of an interesting one. This is United States population projections. In 2012, 2014, and 2017, there were some pretty standard growth rates that were expected across the country. In 2023, the trend has flattened. Trend predictors are saying that our population will continue to increase, but at a much slower rate than had been anticipated, even as recent as 2017. Now, there is debate on how that impacts individual counties and cities, but in general, the trend tends to be flatter in national terms now. I cannot comment on it other than the fact that I've read this in several places. So next one.
So where are we building all the housing for?
Well, that's, excellent question. Excellent question. Not everybody wants to live in the same place. I think that's part of the issue, is that people are more mobile now and have more opportunities. Going back to Minnesota, the last town we lived in, there were 5 or 6 generations of Swansons, and they all lived within 10 miles of each other, and they worked in the factories or they worked on the farm, and the Swansons always stayed in that town. And the Swansons are mobile now, or can be. The next generation of Swansons can live just about anywhere they want. If they want to stay on the farm, great, but if they want to do something different, their opportunities are much broader. I'm from 5 generations of Minnesotans. I'm the first one to leave. And I think they all applauded. But
So the answer is we're building it for migrating old people.
Migrating old people, that's right.
But there's catch-up as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're behind.
Yeah.
So there's that catch-up.
All right.
Something the other day,
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Gen X and above, they're not having children at the same rate that my generation or generation even
Yeah.
after me did.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that they can't afford to have that growth.
Yeah.
Can't afford a
Yeah.
family the way things are today to buy a home that for a family of 4,
Yeah.
for a family of 3,
Yeah. Yeah, it is changing. So here's the question of the day, and I'm not gonna answer it, but I'm gonna throw it out there. Does Clatsop County follow state and national trends? And I'm gonna say maybe. A solid black and white, maybe. But because I wanna leave this glimmer out there that we might be different. We might be, different's not the right word, unique. Because of a couple of things. Let's move on. All right, here's the population forecast. The dotted lines are what were projected the last time. So if you're looking at the middle column, we're already above what they predicted us to be in 2060. Okay, so they are projecting that we are gonna continue to grow a little bit, and then we are going to flatten. We are going to stabilize. We are going to peak in 2047, and then our population will slowly decline as a county as a whole.
How
That's
old will she be in 2047?
2047, let's see, it's 23 years, she'll be 23 and a half.
Just for perspective.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so part of the reason these suggestions or these projections are being made is a change in natural change, births and deaths. That's natural change. The number of people being born in our county is going to decrease. The number of people dying in our county is going to increase. I don't think there's a correlation there, other than that's part of the national trend. Families are not coming together as early as they used to. They're not having as many kids as they used to. And frankly, people are living single lives a lot more than I think anyone expected 50 years ago. So the natural change is going to start to see a decline. Now, they're saying that we will continue to have net migration into our county for the next 23 years. And then at that point in time, the births, deaths will outweigh the net migration, and our population will start to decrease as a county. That's pretty standard trends across a lot of places. That's not unique to us. Maybe. I remember I said maybe earlier, I'm gonna say maybe again. Hit the next one. All right, here's some projections on Clatsop County births. So this would be interesting to hospitals, I would think. We would like to plan for the number of people being born in our community. And the trend is generally down. That is also a fairly standard trend. There's nothing unusual about that in our county. It is generally the case. People are having fewer children. People are not having children. So it is a general trend. The people who are in that age group that generally have children, 20 to 40, that number of those people is also decreasing. I mean, there's bumps and waves with it, but in general, the trend is downward. So unless there's some miracle drug that will allow people to have children a lot later in life, maybe there is, this trend is probably going to hold. Right, next one. County deaths. The older we get, the more we die.
No, maybe on
Maybe.
that.
There is not a maybe on that one. So if our population as a county does increase, we will see more people living in our area that will die while living in our area. And so this is a trend that doesn't surprise me. I mean, we are an older area in general. But the question I'm gonna raise is, who's taking care of all these old people? Probably not other old people. So there may be, maybe another group of people that we will need to have that will need to provide the services and care for the people as we age. Hit the next one. Okay. This is what I call the most unfair graph, because I went back and I got the projections from the last two times they did this for us. And the orangish line is the 2020 projection, the bluish line, the dark blue is the 2017 projection, and now they're looking at the 2024 projection. So it's unfair because I went back and looked at their data. But it's fair because they've under projected our population growth 2 times now. I'm not criticizing at all. That's not my intent here. But there is a little bit of a history here that we have outpaced the growth, both at an individual city level, but on a county level as a whole. Warrenton, Gearhart have both far surpassed the population projections that they have been out for the last couple of times. So I'm calling it unfair. But
And Astoria was that way too. I remember looking at when I first came on council and I was looking at the projections and they didn't have us reaching 10,000 for another 20 years.
yeah,
And we're 10,000.
yeah,
You know, they had the census, we were there.
yeah, exactly. So there's a little bit of history there. Again, not being critical at all to PSU at all, but we have outperformed, if that's the right word, those projections. Go ahead. All right, so here's Astoria. The dotted line was what was projected last time. The green line is what is projected with the current population projections. Growth through 2040, and then a decline after that. Okay. You end up exactly where they thought you would, is what they're saying. They still are. So, but they did not necessarily see the growth that you saw in the last census. And so it's a rise and fall situation. Hit the next one. Here's Cannon Beach. Cannon Beach is an outlier a little bit because of the type of housing and we haven't seen the population growth where people are living there long-term or claiming it as their main residence. People are still going there, don't get me wrong, but that's the population actually did decline slightly in those claiming Cannon Beach as the principal residence. They're saying it's going to rise a little bit, but not as fast as originally expected, and it's going to flatten and plateau. And if there's not a lot of change in the actual boundary of Cannon Beach, that might be true. And I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm just saying that there's some discussion that has to be had at that local level. All right, next one. Gerhardt. Oh my goodness. Surprise. Here's one. The population of Gerhardt is 2,000, give or take. They didn't have you making 2,000 ever before.
That's true.
And so Gerhardt has seriously grown beyond what they originally expected. We're at already beyond the 2070 projection from last time.
One of the reasons is that we got rid of or capped short-term rentals.
There was a change there,
And there
yes.
was a big change, and that was a reason that a lot of the stores closed around that time because people would not buy from our grocery store, they bring it all from Portland, and so a lot of things changed once we kept short-term
So
rentals.
there's a policy decision that was made there that has ups and downs, pluses and minuses associated with it. And so as you make those policy decisions, Gerhardt is a model, at least one option. So hit the next one. Seaside. Seaside is growing a little bit faster than they expected. They still consider Seaside a growth area. They don't see Seaside dropping in population. So
less people will die in Seaside.
yes. Maybe that is the case. All right, next one. Warrenton. They've got Warrenton's growth slowing down, which is really interesting to me. And I shared this with Esther. Warrenton has just given preliminary approval to a 450 unit housing development. And that's not anywhere on here. So that's one that I think Esther and the council commission need to talk about, because this has some potential impacts. It does.
Jay, I think you're just bringing up a really important point that I just wanted to stop.
Go ahead.
The relationship between supply and demand.
Oh.
So, right, if you build it, will they come kind of question, or if you don't have it to build, will they come?
Yeah.
And so I think that's some of what the Clatsop County uniqueness is about in terms of, you know, how does Astoria grow if there's no new supply, right? And is that densification like we were talking about earlier? Is that, you know, changing policy choices that allow for certain activities to happen or whatever? And so I just wanted to point out the supply and demand question.
I had thought about that, you know, this is such a dominant part of the conversation in Astoria, and, you know, maybe our population doesn't grow much, but the demographic of the population changes, so it gets richer. The poor can't afford, again, it gentrifies to a certain degree, and they get in there, and again, if you don't have more housing, you know, if I've got a house that suddenly that I bought for 200,000, I can sell for 500,000, and I get it, somebody who can afford the 500,000 does it, I take my money and run. I moved to Warrington.
Maybe.
I mean,
You're not finding much in Warrington for 500 now.
I know, I realize that. I think we're on the right track. I think the problem is that as we build these units, okay, the first portion is gonna be multifamily apartments.
Yeah.
Okay, which will automatically draw people who are maybe in apartments that are doesn't have the standards they're looking for, and they'll migrate there. But the other homes, the homes that are being built, those are gonna come from the people who live in the outside areas in your communities, who are gonna say, I can buy that home, okay, make some money on the house I had, and still get more than what I had before. And it isn't really new population, it's just a migration to Warrington, which we're happy to have, because we want your taxes.
Well, I think there's some internal migration that we will anticipate through this process. People will say, hey, I want a place on the hill. Maybe at the bottom of the hill, or at the top of the hill, I'm not sure what, but they may want that, or they may want a little space. And so people will move within the county. There is also this external force that's happening. We used to call them Twin Cityites in Minnesota. People who have more money than they know what to do with are buying up things that a normal person can no longer afford. And the anecdotes are all over the place in our region. And so there's this external force that is happening, and it's that ability to move, the ability to afford a second place perhaps, that has really impacted what we're calling the recreational counties. And I think there's 7 of them in Oregon.
Well, and that's actually a really key point, is
Yeah.
the connection to the economy. So
Yeah.
who's gonna live in a place, it might depend on where you work, or where your family works, or what your commute time is, or how you get to where you need to go. And so again, if, we've talked in Cannon Beach, right? You guys have more people commuting in than living in Cannon Beach who work there, and, right, you build a bunch of apartments in Warrenton, does that mean that employees in Cannon Beach are gonna say, oh, I can live in Warrenton and commute to Cannon Beach? Or are they saying, that's still too long of a commute time, I need to find something closer to where I work? And so there is this interconnection, same with Astoria, right? The different kinds of employers that you guys are trying to grow and expand, where do people live? And so I think there is this connection between that as well.
None of these cities is an island. And we are all part of the bigger project, hence the countywide look at this housing issue. So to wrap up the forecast, in general, the growth pattern is going to slow in our area. I think that's a pretty steady trend. I am going to throw out the maybe again about whether or not we are actually going to see the decline that others are predicting. Okay, let's look at some other counties. These are the same counties in this same projection, same report. Tillamook County, they have growing, but they don't have Tillamook County peaking until 2060. We're peaking 2047. And so they've got Tillamook growing an extra 13 years beyond what we have going on. And maybe that's an employment situation. They have the major employer in Tillamook County is still growing. So that may be part of the factors there. Clackamas is also continuing to grow, but they have slowed the rate at which they're predicting Clackamas County will grow. Hit the next one. The next one is Columbia County. They have Columbia County stabilizing in 2060 and maybe losing 5 people in the last projection. So even Columbia County, and I think part of that might be proximity to the Portland metropolitan area. So it's a little different. It's not a recreational county. It is more of a commuting county. All right. Washington County, according to Portland State University, is going to continue to grow, but not nearly at the rate at which was predicted 5 years ago. So, go ahead and hit the next one. And the last one is Yamhill. They've got Yamhill also growing all the way through 2070. Again, proximity, the valley, other jobs base that make it a little bit different, but they have scaled back the growth on most of those areas. So it's an interesting concept. And I think statistically, they can justify slowing the growth rate down. All right, next one. Here's where we are. I already talked a little bit about this. We're in the April-May time. cities have the ability to request a review and a potential appeal. The county is not going to lead that effort. This is an individual city activity. And so if you do not believe that those projections reflect what is on the ground, please take that back to your community, to your staff, to your elected officials, and talk through it. You may decide that, yeah, it's accurate, or you may decide it's underestimating again, and that's going to be your call as a municipality. Hit the next one, please. All right. Under projected Clatsop County population growth in the last two projections has the potential of impacting future funding for local units of government. Has the potential. Depends on what legislation changes happen over the next 10 to 20 years. The other thing that I'm going to throw out there, and this is another maybe, is why would a state invest in a region that's not going to grow? So I'm just saying, this has some potential to have some impacts. Not a criticism at all of the state process at all, but it has some potential. And that's why I want you as individual cities to take some time.
Has this been shared with Cedar?
I'm meeting with Cedar next week. We'll be talking about this.
Instead of the Cedar board.
Yeah.
This would be.
So I'll be meeting with the staff next week to talk about this and a few other things. So, yeah. The question is, do recreational counties follow the same trends? Hit the flip next, last one. All right. Two quick charts, not specific to Clatsop County. These are counties that grew faster than the national average. Most of them are in recreational areas or metropolitan areas. If you're not in a metro area and you are not a recreational county, your growth was not, more than likely, not as fast. But recreational counties have bounced back faster than other rural counties in employment, and that's what the last one talks about. Recreation-based economies, and that doesn't mean everyone has to work in the recreation industry, but counties that are recreational oriented, mountains, ski slopes, beaches, lakes, rivers, whatever it happens to be, a lot of the things that we have, tend to allow those economy to bounce back better from slow times. And they are a draw for a more mobile society. Now, I don't doubt PSU has taken some of this into consideration, but it is up to you as municipalities to decide whether or not you want to have that a further discussion on it. I think that might be the last one. Yeah, it is. Put on. So the population projections are out for discussion. Each of you as individual municipalities need to assess whether or not there's a discussion point that you need to make. And the county is all we're trying to do is simply share the information and make sure that some of the people are going to get it. The staff, all the staff got a copy of the presentation from PSU, and there was a discussion at one of our planning meetings about whether or not some of the counties might take a more strident approach for or against these things. But that's an individual decision that you all will have to make. And so it's information. It is interesting because we are planning for a lot of housing. And I'm saying maybe the projections aren't they aren't showing as much demand. Now that's a debatable subject. And then that's something that's very local for us to be discussing. So I don't have anything else to present to that. Are there any questions or comments here?
Hey, so the city of Gearhart, partly because of what you observed there on that slide, Jay, about the history of under projections, has taken a pretty close look at this over the last couple of months, and Peter Watts, our city attorney in the city of Gearhart, has really been following it closely through multiple cycles of PSU population forecasts. He might as well be a forecaster, I feel like, almost. And he, I think, has some observations about how this is affecting the city of Gearhart now that could bring the topic to life a little bit for everybody. And so I wanted to invite him to just elaborate a little bit more on what he sees for the city of Gearhart, and just to, you know, bring an abstract topic into being a bit more tangible for y'all. So Peter, I mean, do you want to spend a couple minutes going over some of your thoughts on this?
Sure, and I want to be very clear that I'm not trying to criticize the team at PSU. The current team is not responsible for the past projections, the 2010 to 2020 projections. I've been in regular touch with them, and they've been responsive. They emailed me today, in fact, and that may be one of the reasons why Gerhardt's population projection is higher than the other communities in Clatsop County. I've had some concerns since the last time that we did the buildable lands inventory and housing needs analysis. Just anecdotally and through the permits that we have been getting for new housing, it seemed like they were under estimating the actual population growth, as well as the future population growth. Between 10 and 20, they had estimated that we would gain 83 people, and we gained 331. So that was off by a factor of 4. And the reason that there are many reasons that it matters, but one of the primary ones for Gerhardt isn't even about housing. It's that Portland State's projections are used in order to allocate state funds. So gas tax, liquor tax, cannabis tax, any of those shared funds, they don't use the U.S. Census numbers, they use the Portland State population estimates. And that was true of the ARPA funds as well. So if over a 10-year period, if they are underestimating the number of the population, particularly if it's by a large amount.
Did we lose you, Peter?
So that.
You're back.
Yeah.
All right.
Was I out?
Yeah, you cut out for about 10 seconds.
Okay, so we get state shared funds, alcohol tax, cannabis tax, gas tax. That's based on the PSU population estimates. Our ARPA funds were based on the PSU population estimate. So if they are, and this is over a 10-year period, if they are like kind of underestimating us as by a large margin, that is impacting the cities. Gerhardt has a very low fixed tax rate, and as mentioned earlier, we decided to pretty strictly regulate vacation rentals. We ended up litigating that, and ultimately we prevailed. And that was a policy decision that was made by our city council based on what they were looking for. Our concern was that some of the cottages that traditionally had been where working folks lived, someone that worked at the golf course, something like that, those were turning into vacation rentals, and that was negatively impacting our workforce housing. So that was some of the reasoning that kind of led us to be one of the first cities to go with kind of a strict ordinance, and it was appealed. We ended up winning, and I think most people believe it has been the right choice for Gerhardt. So we've tried to use all the tools at our disposal in order to ensure that we have workforce housing between, under the last BLI and housing needs analysis, because we had 20 years, well more than 20 years, I thought, we weren't able to do any upzoning. And as I said earlier, Gerhardt has very limited options as far as an expansion. The way that we would accommodate necessary future growth would be through zoning, and also our our neighboring cities taking growth as well. So one of the reasons that I continue to be concerned about the number, and again, this is anecdotal, and this is Gerhardt specific. Gerhardt has a lot of homes that were essentially second homes, vacation homes for professionals living in Portland. I'm going to say higher net worth individuals. And because they were working, their primary residence was Portland, and they would come to Gerhardt on kind of a, holiday weekends, summer vacations, occasionally weekends, but they weren't living here full time. And one of the census trends that we've discussed and that I looked at is occupancy as a primary residence. And between 10 and 20, our percentage went from 45% to 50% of the homes are the primary residence. So what we are seeing is the generation, pretty widely known as the baby boomers, the eldest portion of that generation is in the 78 kind of age range, and they're starting to retire, which then allows them to they're no longer working, so they can choose the house they want to live in, and a lot of them are legitimately moving to Gerhardt, and because an older population kind of sometimes needs more resources, that is again like causing some concern. I had our fire chief just pull the number of fire calls, and we started noticing this prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic even more so. In 2019, our fire department had 491 calls, and in 2023, they had 744. So we are finding more and more of a need for services, and at a time where we're having less and less workforce housing, and it's become more difficult to attract volunteer firefighters. So these are the sort of things that's the current trend. Whether it reverses or not, I just like anyone else, I don't have a crystal ball. But my emphasis has been, and until we got the 2020 census, none of kind of our theories could be proven one way or the other. But again, what I've raised with Portland State is the issue of fairness, of making sure we're getting our equitable share of state funds and federal funds, and then recognizing that we have one of the largest generations in American history reaching retirement age, which will give them the freedom to choose where they want to live. And at least initially, that choice, whether or not they sell their homes in Portland, their primary residence seem to be trending to their formerly vacation homes. So those are the sort of conversations that I've been having with our city council, that I've been having with Portland State University, and that I think we're going to continue having going forward. And again, my cousin Adam is actually a commander in the Coast Guard, and his family, their dream had been to be at Astoria, Clatsop County. And 2 years ago, they were transferred from Alaska to Clatsop County. And they contacted me and were like, "Can you help us find a house?" And I had been so focused on Gerhardt, I was really not aware of housing situation around Clatsop County, but they had a incredibly difficult. They looked at both buying and renting houses, and there was just no inventory for either. And that's kind of when I became aware of the more global issues countywide. And then I looked at kind of the PSU estimates versus actual, and it's been said earlier, you know, they were off by a pretty substantial factor. So I've asked them to kind of bake that into their current look. So that's, I guess, what I've got on this topic.
Well, I appreciate your comments because a similar situation in Warrenton, and each community has its unique situation, and certainly the Gerhart one is obvious. We've talked about it, and so I guess I appreciate your advocacy on behalf of the county as a whole too. We do have a realtor here in case someone needs a house. Just kidding, so. All right. Any other comments or questions about it? This is not the end of the discussion. This is me presenting information to you and you guys as a group deciding where you might want to take this. And that's entirely your call, but that information, the information I presented is all available on the PSU website. If you have any questions, you can, contact me at the county and I can forward on other information to you and to your staff if you want. So with that, do you have a question?
I don't want to take everybody's time, just want to share something.
Yeah.
So last week, the federal court settled the lawsuits with the National Association of Realtors.
Yeah.
In that lawsuit, it was based upon the fact that there was a preponderance of people throughout the country, not necessarily our area, but throughout the country, that were selling, driving their people to homes that had larger commissions. So commissions can run anywhere from 4 to 6%, depending where you live. Feel free to jump in. But basically, the way this is coming back out, which will take effect in June, will affect the buying market, because what will happen is that sellers will now negotiate their commission only to the selling agent.
Okay.
But the thing that makes the difference is the buyer will now negotiate their own commission, where before the seller paid all the commission, and then it was split between the agents. Now that buying agent will negotiate with their buyer whatever the commission is going to be for them. But keep in mind that buyer, especially those first-time buyers, are going to have an extra burden on them, because now the interest rate's higher, but they now have the burden now of that extra commission they have to structure.
Sure.
Which means that less people at that starter level that, are going to be able to afford, especially where we sit with houses and interest rates today. So that means that there's going to be more people looking to find secondary or find apartment living or things like that. Because they will not be able, they're going to be priced out, at least in markets our size, but based upon how prices are here, from being able to afford that starter home in the $300,000 to $400,000 range. So it makes a big difference. I think that when you talk about how everybody's sure shifting, it's going to change the market, because this is throughout the whole nation.
Sure. I think that added cost to first-time buyers or people who are at the lower echelons of our scale, that does have potential to impact whether or not I've got an extra 5,000 to do, and we'll see how it comes out. But I think it is an interesting issue and I was aware of that change.
And I can see that going down too. There tends to be a wash, because the seller will price the houses because he don't have to pay as much commission. So buyer will, instead of it being having to pay more for the house, pay less for the house, they have could turn out to be a wash. Also, as a buyer, I don't have to get a buyer's realtor either. I can just deal with their realtor. No, you're gonna have to pay both sides. But if I don't use a realtor, if you don't use a realtor,
on your side, and you decide to sell the houses you're selling by yourself, you don't have to pay anybody anything.
Right, whereas a buyer.
But the buyer just brings an agent, and you decide you want to work with that agent, you then have to pay that agent.
But if I go to the agent that is selling the house, without
Yeah,
my
you
own
do
agent.
away with agents completely.
And then we're all looking for work, so then you get a whole new problem. That's why you-
I actually think this brings up Steve's question before, which is, who are we building housing for? Right,
Yeah.
so when you're looking at the population forecast, you're looking at our employment trends, you're looking at, you know, an aging population, pricing out first home buyers. We have a chance to marry our population forecast with our housing choices to say, hey, we want young families to live here. We want to be able to have employees to support our local businesses. We don't just want all second homes. We don't just like to, you know, the story of Gearhart, like, what are we building and who's actually living in them? And so I actually think that's really the upside of this conversation is, you know, whether you buy it or you don't, you know, all the methodology, you say, what happens if we build 400 units for working class families in Warrenton? We're building a certain kind of supply because that's a certain type of choice we want to make. Hey, we're gonna make it really hard to build houses, so only people who have a lot of money and a lot of time can build houses. That's a self-fulfilling population growth prophecy,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
And so I think that's your question, Steve, was the core question here, which is,
Mhm.
do we want to put a little intention about what kind of housing supply we're producing for who we're trying to serve?
So in taking that another step too, are we building housing, rental housing, or are we building homeowner housing? Where is our emphasis? Do we need one more than the other? And are we thinking in those terms? And if we are thinking in those terms, what kind of policy choices are we gonna make?
I think one of our discussions earlier on was talking about hitting all cylinders, not just focusing on one type.
I agree.
And so I think if that is kind of the general premises of where we're going, we'll see what the additional data that we're getting, can help us make those decisions, because.
Well, I asked that, just real quick, I asked that question because our mayor says we have enough rentals.
I can't comment.
And he makes an emphasis that we need to build housings build home ownership housing, period. But that's where all the emphasis would be, and states that our 2019 housing study says that.
But the housing purchases are based upon the types of businesses that are sustaining the employees to be able to decide what they
Sure,
want.
yeah.
You bring in Microsoft tomorrow and they're, you know, and they're doing something here in the community and they're paying them six figures, they're gonna buy a higher end home. But that's not what's coming. That's not what we're gonna get.
Well, and that, you may be speaking in general, Astoria, so we have a new hospital, it's gonna increase living wage jobs, we have a development out Tongue Point that's creating more living wage jobs. Our breweries are supposed to be paying living wages now, so, because they were the ones that came when we were trying to build affordable housing, 80% saying, we pay too much for them to afford to live, they can't live there, it's just an interesting discussion, because I know in Astoria, at least from my point of view, the more diverse economy we have, the better. So a reliance on a service economy is gonna be a mistake. In the paper the other day, Bornstein's closing down Newport and Bellingham and focusing on Astoria. That means more jobs in Astoria too. Those won't be the same level of jobs either. But again, it's really an interesting and complex question.
But Bornstein already, majority of their employees live in Washington and come here.
Okay. Well, let's get them to move to Warrington.
All right, we could. The second side of this, and I've jokingly said that Clatsop County is planning, boldly planning, I think is the term I used when I submitted a pre-application for a TGM application for a new transportation system plan. We're doing housing planning. Each of the cities is doing infrastructure planning. We're all updating ordinances left and right. I mean, we've got all sorts of things happening. Add to that, we have an economic opportunities analysis, an EOA countywide that we're working on, presenting some information tonight on that is going to talk about where are the jobs coming from, what are they going to be, and how are we going to target those types of jobs. And so that EOA isn't going to be site specific, but it's like, what do we want to bring into the community? Diversification is a huge buzzword that we're using.
So part of the whole thing on the economic opportunities analysis, project the county has is, the folks from Wanna Mill were saying that when their employees come to the area, they go to Cowlitz County, Washington. That they don't look west.
Yeah.
They look, to the east, towards Columbia County and then particularly across the river in Cowlitz County.
Right.
And so that's where, and the thing is that, but I'll tell you that there is a very large economic development project coming to Columbia County. And Columbia County is doing, there's another great grant funded project that DLCD is providing to Columbia County to look at how to scale up construction, housing, and permanent housing for this economic development project, which is gonna happen in Clatsop. And because the thing is it's, and right now, Cowlitz County has its own housing issues as well. And so, I think you're starting to look at though, the issues of, affordability, and the question is, if you have more housing across the board, are people now living in housing that is not their first choice to be able to live in, and are people living in multifamily housing in some areas, doubling up, tripling up, quadrupling up? I have a friend in Astoria who works at a professional job, and they are couch surfing right now, looking for rental housing in Astoria.
But there's plenty of it.
So I think that it's a complex issue, and I think looking at it across the board, there's housing that's needed at the breadth of levels.
Well, and
is
to
what I
your
was-
point, even the construction workers who are gonna build the economic development project, they're like looking for places for the
Right.
construction workers so
Right.
that they can actually grow. And that's actually a Clatsop County opportunity
Yeah.
is, do we wanna grow our construction industry so we can actually have people building stuff that we need?
Yeah, it goes back to your question about the hospital. I spent 10 years at the hospital, working at CMH, handling this issue. And I will tell you that the biggest problem about recruiting, especially, professional level staff, is of where are you gonna live and how do you afford to live there? And then dealing with that, and then you go to your MAs and CNNs, and then you figure out, how am I supposed to, find a place to live? If I'm moving there from Portland, even with bonuses, how do I afford to live in that area?
Yes.
That's right.
It probably relates a little bit to Providence as well. The same concept of, can business grow in an area where we cannot house the employees we need to make the business grow? It's a circle. And so hopefully we can attack parts of this so that it's less of a vicious cycle than it seems to be. Any other questions or comments on that? I am going to declare this meeting well attended, well run, and well over. Thank you all for participating. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks.
Jen.
Yeah.